All right, well, let's go ahead and get started then for the people who are here. For those who don't know, my name's Grant Fritchey. I work for Redgate Software, and this is my contact information. If you want to get in touch with me after this evening, that's my Twitter handle, it's my email address, it's my blog. Feel free, reach out, ask me questions. I thrive on questions. Every question usually gives me a blog post. So please ask questions. As we go through the presentation tonight, if you want to, you can unmute yourself. I don't know if you can or not. I don't know how the meeting is set up. But if you can and you want to, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Or if not, put them in the chat window, and I'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, hey, I can keep an eye out for the chat stuff.
Okay.
You don't have to worry. And then I think everybody can just unmute themselves, so everybody knows you can do that. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Well, and feel free to interrupt as we go. Don't feel like this is formal. Again, I'm also very informal in the way I do this stuff. So it's all, we're all good. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and get going. Come on, there we go. All right, our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about DevOps, not a lot. I do want to do a little intro on DevOps, but then we're just going to get into GitHub and start talking about GitHub Actions and the tools and how they work and how you could probably try to plug in database deployments into GitHub Actions to arrive at something that resembles DevOps. Cool. All right, so this is my personal definition of DevOps. And it's based on a bunch of research, lots of experience, years of using the stuff. And I know you're not supposed to read your slide, but I'll go ahead and read it. It's an agile culture that better supports collaboration between people, that uses automation and tooling in support of process. For me, the whole important part here is that it is the idea of an agile culture supporting collaboration between people. That's the driver. So many people get hung on DevOps and start talking about tools. So many people get into DevOps and start talking about process. And the problem is people. And so if you're not focused first on people, it's going to make your entire DevOps process harder. The other thing I want to say about DevOps is that DevOps is just a shorthand. There's not some magic formula that defines DevOps. DevOps is just a shorthand for this kind of concept. Now I'm going to give you another definition of DevOps. Now, this is from Donovan Brown. It's much shorter, and I really like it because the brevity. I tried to get mine. I thought mine was brief. But this is better. DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. That pretty much sums it up. The thing I want to emphasize over and over again is don't worry about the term. Don't get hung on, are we doing DevOps or are we not doing DevOps? Don't sweat it. If you're doing some kind of thing where you're supporting people, you're supporting the processes, you're enabling a continuous delivery process whereby you're automating testing and automating deployments so that you can get stuff out the door, you're doing your job. Whether or not you call it DevOps or not, it doesn't matter as much. The focus needs to be on that automation and on that support of people. People first. And you'll notice I talk about an agile culture and then collaboration between people. Donovan talks about the union of people, process, and products, and it's people first. I mean, it's people before products, or before process, before products. So you focus first on your people, focus first on communication, focus first on the individual. Then worry about your process. How are we going to do this? Right? What is the best way to support the things that we need to support? And everybody's got different angles and different wrinkles and different issues they're going to have to deal with. Well, we're in SQL Server and Postgres. Well, we're only in Postgres, but we also have to support a migration to, Snowflake. There's all kinds of stuff that happens, and everybody's got their own unique setup that they're going to have to deal with. But if you're focusing first on your people, then on your process, The products can fill in the gaps at the end. So that's just the key to all this. So that's my level set. That's like bring everyone along, sing kumbaya, and then we can get going. All right? Because now we're going to talk about products. Those are.
I like your saying, because it does focus more on the people thing. I think that's one of the things where I work, especially my DBA coworkers, like, oh, DevOps, oh, all this automation and stuff, because it's like really about the tools and stuff and less about the people. I think that's one thing I'm going to mention. I took a screenshot of that just so I can send it to him, because that's a really important point.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is the most important point, and I mean, I've done consulting, on DevOps. I've gone in. I mean, understand, I work for Redgate Software. Redgate Software is a software vendor. As a software vendor, we make products, right, for doing DevOps.
Right.
That's what we do. But I have gone in and consulted on DevOps implementations. I've done my own DevOps implementation before I worked for Redgate. I was doing DevOps. I just didn't know that's what it was called. We've automated database deployments, to the point where you could push a button and it would happen. I mean, and you didn't even have to push the button. We had it scheduled sometimes. We had it based on a trigger sometimes, and it's just sort of the way you want to set it up. And we'll get into talking about some of that, because we are going to talk products. We are technologists, but anytime I've tried to implement this, I've always focused first on the people, because that's the place where it's going to fail. It's not going to fail on the tools. The tools there's a lot of them. There's a lot of work around them. You're going to see a whole bunch of them this evening. But the tools work. Where it fails is the people. So if you're not focusing first on the people, then the rest just won't matter.
It makes sense, because I think a lot of times we feel like little interchangeable Lego pieces too. And it sort of just brings up that idea that, when we're working with people and collaborating with them and kind of trying to meet them some point where they're at, to get them into the process.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Cool. Well, but we're not going to talk about that anymore now.
Okay. Well, that's too bad. This could be like a whole psychology of IT people presentation otherwise. Okay.
Oh, I've got one of those if you want. No, we're gonna start talking about tools, because the focus of this one is on tools. It is on GitHub specifically. GitHub is something I use personally all the time. If you want to take a look at the code today, it's up on GitHub. You guys can go and get it anytime you want to. It's all available there. GitHub is very simple. It's an internet-hosted software development and version control management tool. And they do emphasize the fact that they are a software development tool and a version control management tool, not simply a version control management tool. And they are coming out with more and more functionality that makes them more and more useful as software development. And GitHub Actions is one of those things. Now, we are also going to be talking about YAML. And I don't care what anyone says, YAML means yet another markup language. I know that the new definition is YAML, Y-A-M-L, means YAML ain't markup language, which is, what do they call that, a tautology? It can't mean both. YAML can't mean YAML. So it is yet another markup language. That said, it is a handy markup language. It's much simpler to use than JSON, and JSON was simpler than XML. So we have simplified down our markup language to the point. I mean, I know that other people are trying to simplify them further, but I think that's just going to cause confusion. I don't think you can simplify much more than here's a space and now here's the word. I mean, it's kind of hard to get much more easy than that.
It's pretty funny. I like that they're acknowledging that it's yet another one, though, because I had to learn Custo in Azure, right, for the whole Azure SQL auditing stuff I do. It's like yet another language. It's like,
oh yeah,
eye rolling. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I feel for you. I mean, I feel for anyone who's not yet in or prepped for learning YAML. because now you're going to have to learn YAML. By the way, if you're working in AWS Developer Tools, which is their DevOps tool suite, it uses YAML. And if you're using Azure DevOps, it uses YAML. So YAML is definitely the way things are going. If it makes you feel better, I think last time I looked, Octopus was still using JSON, but Jenkins is using YAML. So YAML is definitely a driver in and around DevOps tooling.
That's good.
Cool.
I like that. That's good news.
Well, yeah. If you learn one, you've learned them all.
If only,
all right.
yeah.
All right. Well, let's start off with the first thing. Now, we are talking today about GitHub Actions. I'm going to get into a couple of demos and we'll walk through them, but I want to talk concepts first. And from a conceptual standpoint, the first thing we have to think about is events. Now, events, there can be more than one event, you can have multiple events, or you can have a list of events. And you can put in if, case statements, all that fun stuff to figure it out. But the events are simply really one of three things. It's on a schedule. Cool. Once a day, do this. Every 30 minutes, do that. That kind of idea. Simple enough to understand. Nobody's confused. Next is webhooks. And that is more or less, if you're thinking databases, it's a trigger. And the webhooks are simply a command that you can send into a thing called a webhook. You can have a monitor inside of the events, inside of GitHub Actions that will look for those webhooks and respond to that particular webhook. And yes, you can have more than one webhook, and they can come from more than one source, and they can do more than one thing. So it can get very, very dense very, very quickly. When I do demos here, because there are so many moving parts, I tend to keep it real simple and do very simplistic demos. And anytime I start advising people in building out a DevOps framework, I also recommend that you keep it really simple to start with, because it's going to make things a whole lot easier. Now, the other event you do have to think about is the workflow reuse, meaning you can create a workflow and then use that workflow as an event. In other words, run a build. If that build is successful, fire another event, for example. But you get the idea. So that's our start. We have a series of events, one event, multiple events, or a list of events, any way you want to run it. So it's all about you setting it up, and we'll see it in the code when we look at it. All right. Next are jobs. Jobs, like events, you get one of them, you get a lot of them. Also, if you get more than one job, you can set up the job so they're parallel or serial. Now, what's a job? Well, a job basically is a series of steps, a series of commands. So one single job could be to run Flyway, for example. The demos I'll be doing today, I'll be using Flyway. It's a open source tool. It is owned currently by Redgate, but it is completely open source. So I'm not trying to sell you anything. This is a free tool. Get it, use it, love it. It's actually fantastic. But it's completely free too. So I'm not trying to sell anything. Yay, I love that. I can be a good salesman, but I'm not going to do that today. So yay. Anyway, a job, effectively what it's doing is when you set up an event and the event fires and it's going to start running these jobs basically are just running on a server, and they sort of define a server that they're running on. And so a lot of this stuff all really depends on virtualization, because what it's going to do is it's going to spin up a virtual machine. The virtual machine, whatever definitions you give it and whatever software you load onto it or commands that you load onto it, that's all going to run your stuff. And so that's effectively what's happening. That's the same thing that's happening inside of AWS. If you were to look at the way it runs, it's actually running an AWS VM to do all the things. Microsoft, I think, is doing it differently. I think they've got like actual services mixed with VMs, but I don't know all the details at a lower level with the Microsoft stuff. But here in GitHub, land, it is very much you're defining a virtual machine, and that's what's running. And then each of the jobs consist of one or more steps. What are the steps? Well, hang on, we're not quite there yet. And steps are simply commands. Do this, do that, and you can run one, you can run more. And remember, they can be run parallel. So you will have to think about that as you set stuff up. Almost everything I've ever done is serial, although I did have a situation where I was supporting a company I can't name. Yeah, I can't name them anymore still. But they supported a phone system across the entire United States, and they had a database, like basically a database in every city. And we would have to do database deployments in parallel across the US. So there was a lot of learning about threading and stuff back then. But anyway, that's another thing. But most of the time it's serial deployments. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about here just shortly is database tools, because we've talked about the idea that we're in source control in GitHub. Cool. GitHub Actions then respond to stuff going on in source control through webhooks. They create a virtual machine. That virtual machine, they can run commands. Cool. What commands can it run? Well, that's where we've got to have something that gets our code and deploys a database. This is the magic moment, right? This is the hard part. Microsoft supplies us with SSDT, SQL Server Database Tools, but they are Windows only. They don't support containers or containerization. So you have to go do an install someplace to run it, or you have to be using Microsoft services to run it. Well, that's not going to work for you in GitHub Actions. So you're going to have to look for something that's containerized, like Flyway. That would be my recommendation. Although you could use, there's also DBUp and a couple of others. But you're going to want to look at one of these tools to make that extra step, because otherwise things get real hard. In terms of deployment targets, what does GitHub Actions support? You name it, it supports it. I've got right now Microsoft stuff listed, because this previously, when I did this presentation, we were doing it for Azure. So I very much focused on Microsoft stuff. But I could take my GitHub Actions and deploy to Oracle. I could take my GitHub Actions and deploy to AWS, Google Cloud Platform. Heck, I could go to Alibaba. I mean, I can get anywhere I need to from GitHub Actions. It's just a question of setting up the correct channels and permissions, and then off you go. So you don't need to worry about what database you're supporting. Also, you don't need to sweat what version. It's not like it only supports, or any of the tools that we're talking about support only SQL Server 2019. No. They go all the way back to SQL Server 2008. They support old versions of Postgres. They support old versions of MySQL. So you're not going to have to worry about these things. It's just a question of pick your targets and then do the deployments. The fun thing is once you start doing this GitHub Actions stuff and you rope in a tool like Flyway or DBUp, the commands to deploy to Oracle are the same as the commands to deploy to SQL Server. So you are learning a tool. So it's like, the one ring. You've got one thing that pulls it all together and makes it easy to work. Cool. All right. Oh, it's demo time. Awesome. I knew we were going to get to it eventually. Give me a second. Come up with the first demo. There. All right. This is Visual Studio Code. I could show the same thing to you in Azure Data Studio. Heck, with a little bit of work, I could show it to you in SSMS, but I'm just using Visual Studio Code. And what I'm showing you specifically is the layout of the way Flyway works. Flyway works off a little bit of magic, and a little bit of magic is a naming standard. The naming standard is visible right there. You kind of can't miss it, but I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. The idea here is that you give it a version. This is v1.1, and then 2 underscores. And after that, anything goes. I'm just giving them descriptive names. I've seen people put in dates. I've seen people put in codes. I've seen people put in all kinds of combinations of different things. It's how you want to organize stuff. But the first thing you have to supply is a V and a number. It has to be a valid number. And yes, it can be 1.1.1.1 if you want it to be, but it has to be a number that's going to order the order in which scripts are run. Now, yeah, no, that's it. You have to put them in the order in which scripts are run. However, it also has, oh no, not that. Oh, I don't have a repeatable one. Okay, I have to update the code here at some point. It also has the capability of doing repeatable deployments. And so that's stuff like store procedures or view definitions that you want to just make sure that they're always there. You know, if not exists, create this, right? That kind of code. And so you're going to be able to create the stuff that you need to create on the fly. But it just runs them in order. And that's all Flyway does. It is a manifest management tool. There are paid versions of it. I'm not going to get into them at all. There are paid versions of it, but the open source is all I'm showing you here, and that's all and that all works. Okay, cool. So that's that. So now let's step to here. Okay, so this is my GitHub repository, and I've got all kinds. It's public. Go in there, steal anything you want. It's all open. ScaryDBA at GitHub. That's at github.com/ScaryDBA. Now, the one that we're looking at here is Flyway, and this has my GitHub workflows in it. You'll notice it is a specific name, .github/workflows. That is part of the structure that you will have to set up if you're going to use this to do your database deployments. Let's go ahead and open that up. And now I've got two of the YAML files, so we'll start with this one. What I did here is that they've got a generic actions demo, and I use that. And because I used it because it actually makes it easy to teach, because it's really straightforward. You're giving it a name, GitHub Actions demo. Oh, okay. On. Now remember, I talked about events, and I did specifically put the on command in there, and that's because within your YAML file, that's the first thing you want. On, and then some event. In my case, it's push. So every time I do a push to GitHub for this particular repository, this action will fire. Okay, so, but it will only fire on a push. It won't fire on a pull. It won't fire on a schedule. It won't do any of the other stuff. It'll only work on push. So that's one of those things. And by the way, I'm assuming people know git, push, pull, branch commands. If you don't know that, have me back another day and I will teach you git. But otherwise, I'm assuming you know the basics of git.
That was what I thought. What are you going to tell us right now? I thought maybe you're going to pull like a rabbit out of a hat, because I was thinking, I know that stuff, but I wondered how you're going to give us a brief tutorial right now.
No, I'm not even going to try to give a brief tutorial on git. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Yeah, well, we can have you back, but it probably won't be for that, I'm guessing. But
well, here,
there's
really shortly,
tutorial out there.
Yeah, really shortly, a pull is me getting code or requesting to add code. A push is adding code, and a branch is creating a copy of the code. There's a bunch of other ones that we're not going to get into today because they're not applicable. Although you could have commands on clone or all the other commands that are available in Git. But those are the big ones. Now you've got the gist of it. Off we go. Now, jobs. Well, it's simple. These are my jobs. Now you'll notice, again, this is YAML. So, excuse me, sorry about that. There's a gap right here. That's the magic of YAML. No brackets, no dashes, just that gap. That defines one level in. So this is Explore GitHub Actions is the name. And now we see another gap, one level in. Runs on. Remember, we talked about jobs defining machines that they run on. In this case, I'm running on Ubuntu latest. Ubuntu is still my favorite Linux flavor. If yours is different, good for you. Not having a war on it because it really doesn't matter that much to me. Then we define our steps. So it's exactly the stuff that we laid out. on some action. Here's a job. It runs on a machine, and it has these steps. Now, the steps in this case, again, notice another gap, giving us that next little layer of separation within the YAML. Run, and in this case, an echo command. And this job was automatically triggered by, and it goes out and gets the event name. Run, this job is now running on, and it lets us know what OS it's running on. The name of your branch is, I'm on the main branch right now. And a repository is, well, you already know it's the Hamshack Flyway repository. And then it plugs in some other stuff, and it's just running commands, and that's all this does. It's really simple, and I like it because it lets us see what it is that we're doing. Now let's look at a slightly, it's in some ways simpler, but in other ways it's not at all. And this is Flyway commands to run. Now in this one it says, oops, hang on, let me zoom in a little bit.
Grant,
on this
I have
one,
a question.
Of course.
So I hope it's not a dumb question, but so if you didn't have those indents, would the file, or would this fail? This deployment fail?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
YAML. Oh yeah. YAML would die.
Does it
well, not
give
YAML.
you
The commands would die.
right? Does it give you more of an indication of like where you're missing an indent? Because I could see that so easily happening.
Oh, no kidding. I agree. Which is why if you're going to deal with YAML,
Oh, if you have a code editor or yeah, that should help
you
then.
want to be
Okay.
using, yeah, see it?
Yeah.
You see how it's laid out there now?
That makes sense. Yeah.
You absolutely want Visual Studio Code. I think there might be other ones that work, but VS Code works really well.
Okay. Good to know.
It makes it so simple to understand what's going on. And you can see that you see the same setup. And this one's on a schedule. Actually, thanks for asking that question. That's a great question because it brought me over and get me to show you some more stuff. So this one runs regularly on a schedule. It's a cron job, and then it just does a workflow dispatch, and then the jobs start, and that's it. Now the jobs are, run Flyway script, runs on Ubuntu latest. We give it steps. We give the steps a name. We tell it what it's using, and in this case, uses is telling it to get. It's telling it to use this Flyway command through what's called the Flyway hub, which I'll show you in a second. And then it just runs the commands, and so it's real simple. Switch back over to the other one. Now this one you'll notice is a little more complicated. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I should be back now.
Bless
I had
you.
to sneeze.
Bless you.
Oh,
did you
I didn't get away with it?
Or did you try to sneeze? Well, anyway, bless you. Whatever happened.
I muted so I wouldn't blow your ears out.
It was good. It was good. We didn't hear anything.
Okay, cool. All right, so it's working off my main branch. I do have to define paths. The paths in this case is just where to go to find the SQL. But it's all nothing's complex as such. But what it's doing is it's running that Flyway command to run the database deployment. And that's all it's doing. It's pretty simplistic. Now, that particular command, let me show you the results of it. Well, the results of my scheduled command. Where is it? There we go. So I've got the schedule command running regularly every night, and I intentionally have it failing because I want to be able to show this off in demos. So every night I get an alert from GitHub Actions, and no, I don't get woken up for this because I would burn down the building otherwise. But you get the idea here: Scary DBA, Flyway demo, test migrations, workflow run, and it failed. Well, how did it fail? Well, let's go. Oops. Let's go take a look at it. I'm still presenting, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
We still see your screen. Yep.
Yeah, good. I hit a button. It's like, oh no. All right, cool. So this is the fun stuff. So what it's doing is it's setting up an operating system. Again, remember Ubuntu. It's looking at what the version is and the software. It's taking a look at the imager. It's looking at any kind of permissions. And yes, I am passing in some permissions to make this all work. which I'm not going to get into the details on that. It's then running it all from within containers. So it's firing up Ubuntu, cool, but the actual work is going on in containers. It's pulling out these containers, in this case, a Flyway container, and it's running the Flyway containers. I've got some bad code, and it's intentionally hitting that bad code. And it says v1 of this action is deprecated because, this is old code that I've got in place. But it's in failing every time. But you can see that while it sounds like we're doing a gazillion hard things, we're actually not. It's actually really straightforward. It's not that hard. It is very much following the process of on an action, run these jobs, which consist of these steps. And oh, by the way, the jobs, we have to define the server they run on. That's it. I mean, that's literally it. That's all you have to do. Now, I also want to show you one other thing. This is Flyway. Oh, no, not that. This is Flyway Hub. And this is a couple of projects I have. This is the tutorial built into the tool. And if you guys run in there, you can run the tutorial and do the builds and stuff yourself. But this is my Flyway Ham Shack project. So what I want to do is show you that it's running against Postgres. It is running from Flyway. It is running, all of this is GitHub Actions, even though it looks like it's a Flyway Hub thing. This is free, it's open source right now, probably forever because it's too simplistic. But what it's going to do is it's going to create a database. It's going to run all of my scripts. It's going to run static code analysis against my database, and then it's going to clean it all up 30 minutes later. So let's just go ahead and, we can actually look at it. There it is. So it's just doing these GitHub actions, same way as I had defined. So notice this one's doing a delete, it's renaming, adding a workflow, updating the workflow, adding this, adding that, and it just runs. This one, on the other hand, has been failing. But you get the idea. It's actually really simple. Now let's go ahead and run it. We're running against Postgres, running against the main branch. We can add a bunch of other stuff, but we're not going to. This is just a core continuous integration process. This is all this is. I schedule this and run it, but I also can run it manually. And we'll take a look at the static analysis results too. Now, the database it's creating, by the way, is a virtualized database through a container process. So again, the reason it's only taking 30 seconds is because we're spinning up machines through containerization to make things easy. And ta-da, there it finished out everything. It's run all the stuff, and we can take a look at the static code analysis and notice that a lot of the code I have is bad. I don't have the single trailing new line. Let's see, what else have I got? Yeah, again, trailing new line. As a person, I don't know who anyone who knows me, but a person who's always insisted that, yeah, you've got to put in semicolons on everything. I'm really bad about doing this in Postgres. I've got to get better.
I'm terrible at it. I barely ever put in semicolons unless I have to, so I'm terrible with it.
Well, interestingly enough, this stuff, it's finding violations in my formatting. And and also that I'm doing unquoted identifiers and with Pascal case, which causes problems in Postgres. So it's actually catching some really good stuff in my code. Things, I mean, my Postgres skills are still under development, very much so. But
yeah, wait till you get to Postgres functions. Let me tell you about Postgres functions because that is a lot of fun that I've been struggling with. So yeah.
I'll work on it. But you can
how you can do dynamic SQL, like you can just do something in dynamic SQL and SQL Server, right? You can't do that in Postgres. You've got to use a function, and then there's all this thing. Anyway, I won't sidetrack too much, but I understand because I'm still learning things in Postgres as well.
Cool. Well, that sounds great. I mean, maybe that'll be my next articles, learning how to do functions, and then I can bug you for answers.
Yeah, I can give you tips. It's a lot of fun.
I'm not shy. I'll ask. Don't you worry. But you see line is too long. I mean, I've got little bits and pieces of stuff that I've messed up here. But this is a really easy way to run a series of checks on your database that doesn't involve crazy amounts of work. So how are we doing on time? A little early. Where am I? Lost track. Aha, there we go. All right, so hopefully we hit the agenda. I went a little fast tonight, and I do apologize for that. But if anybody has any questions or comments, or if there's some other stuff you'd want to see, I can definitely show you and fool around some.
Yeah, it was pretty fast. Well, that's okay.
I apologize.
If you want to wrap up too, that's totally fine. It's no worries.
I have a
Well,
quick
no, I don't
question.
want to. Sure, no, please.
How did you set up those checks? Like how
That
does
one was that one
yeah.
was that one is a trick of the hub itself of GitHub
So that's like
of
built into GitHub?
no, that's built into the Redgate tool.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
But but it's free. It's
Got it.
up there
Yeah.
now. You guys can run it all yourself. But it is part of the Redgate tool.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. It's fun stuff. I mean, there's a lot you can do. Now, if I wanted to do it myself, here, hang on one second. Let's switch right back over to lost track of it. There it is. If I wanted to do it, I would do it right here.
Okay.
So
And
right now,
so if I was just to search for this specific thing through Redgate, it would just be their flyway migrate.
yeah. Well, hang on. Let me show you that.
Okay.
So this is flyway.org. Is where you go to get the free open source tool. Flyway is flyway.org, and then at the flyway.org is the hub, and the hub is a total preview, completely free, and it's database continuous integration. That's
And it's
all
through
it
Redgate?
is. It is through Redgate, but
Okay,
it's
perfect.
completely free. Yeah.
No, we have Redgate it through work, so I was just wondering. But that is also a plus for with it being free. So great.
Yeah. But Flyway itself, the way you want to run Flyway is, I'm not going to run these commands right now because I haven't set up my database. So all I do is generate errors. So I don't want to just sit around here generating errors right now. But Flyway itself is real simple. You do Flyway baseline, Flyway migrate, right? Flyway validate is the core commands on Flyway. But then if I wanted to do more, like run testing, say, if you wanted to run T-SQL-T, for example, if you had a SQL Server instance and you want to run T-SQL-T, that's where, I had the right thing open and I messed up. There we go. That's where you just go in here and add another step, T-SQL-T, and run T-SQL-T commands. Oh, wait, there we go. Uses, and then in this case, you would definitely tell it to use a Windows virtual machine, which I don't have in my head, but I could look it up. And then just steps, and tell it what steps to run, and that's it. I mean, it's shockingly simple to do this stuff. It's when you first look at it, it looks overwhelming, impossible, crazy. Oh my God, there's no way I can ever learn this. But then you just figure out that it's just on jobs. Tell the job what it is, tell the step what it is, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward.
It's
I
shockingly simple.
think I heard about YAML a long time ago, and I just wasn't familiar with the whole like the use of it. Versus like JSON. I was like, oh, what is this? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
Well, I mean, and YAML's a pain, right? But the simple part is how easy this part is, right? Because
right.
it really is just define these steps, and then the steps are going to be whatever you need them to be. The one, again, the one I showed you that we ran, we ran a container to run flyway commands. That's it. I mean, it's and then all you've got to do is tell it, get latest on the container. It takes it an extra 15 seconds to download it. Once that's downloaded, it runs a series of commands. Once you're done, it throws it all away. It's incredibly simple. But it's once you understand that, that whole runs on, and then you're basically just issuing, commands to Linux, it all gets easy.
But this could be used on like a Windows server.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, not just Linux. Okay.
Oh, no, not just Linux. Linux is easier. I won't lie. And Linux containers are faster.
Oh, yeah.
So if you can, I mean, especially for a testing environment, if you can test on Linux and then do your main deployments out to SQL Server on Windows or Azure or wherever, you can do it all that way. But if you're doing your testing stuff on Linux, it's going to be faster. And the faster you can do tests, the happier you're going to be, generally.
I'm going to put Linux in air quotes as easier. I know I have to use Linux all the time. We have a lot of Postgres instances where I work, but I always think easier in air quotes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the Linux GUI. It's a horror show. But Linux containers are way easier.
Oh, yeah, Linux containers, I agree. They're way, yeah.
The command line's the same, but the speed is faster, the flexibility is better. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of stuff you can do with containers inside of Linux that's just easier than Windows. And you would still be doing the same kind of command line driven stuff in Windows. So you're, the advantage of the GUI, and there is an advantage to the GUI in Windows, I won't lie. But the advantage of the GUI is written off at that point.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Very good point.
Any other?
You make it look easy. I'll say that. If I went to do this on my own now, I'd be like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. But he made it look easy, and I like that.
Well, I mean, it's not so much whether or not it's easy. The key I would emphasize again, in terms of trying to do this with your own databases, I would focus on simple first. It gets complicated fast, so don't try to make it easy. Try to make it simple. I always tell people, if you can do CI, you can do everything else. And CI is continuous integration. And CI is completely independent of humans. It's testing. Generally, I recommend strongly you test without data. So you bear it down to nothing. A database, code in the database, is that all successful? Yes? Cool, right? It's as simple as we can make it. And then from there, we start to add in the complexities. Okay, by the way, I've got replication, so I got to tear that down before I do the deployment. And you know what I mean? The world gets ugly fast. So initially, while we're learning it, if we just keep things really, really simple, it'll make it
for sure.
It'll make it easy.
So I shouldn't do that with my 40 terabyte Postgres database with all the roles and functions. And you're saying don't do that first.
Okay. Not first. No. Second.
Okay. Second. Oh yeah, second. Okay, yeah. Yeah, second. If I want to have a nervous breakdown and go to the funny farm, then yeah, I think yeah. So we have a question in the chat actually.
Oh sure.
So they asked, if I want to set up a repository from scratch for my SQL database, can I use YAML? And what are the tools I can use from Redgate to achieve that?
Okay, so if you want to do MySQL from scratch, you are going to be doing
P.S. they're a big fan of you. By the way, if
thank
you didn't see the chat.
I don't see it for some reason, but that's my fault. I probably just haven't clicked on the right button. Here, 1 second. Let me just show you. So you don't have to use a Redgate tool. You could certainly use There are multiple tools out there. The two I recommend are Flyway or DBUp. I'm not as big a fan of DBUp as I am of Flyway. I find Flyway a little easier to use. DBUp has a couple of things that Flyway doesn't, which can be attractive depending on what you need. But basically, they're the same. They are both manifest deployment tools. So you want to get to this. Now let's hide some of this just to get rid of some of the. Basically, you need a Flyway configuration file, which tells it where's it going. You need a JDBC connection to your MySQL database. I'm using a login and a password, and yeah, there's my secret login and my secret password, and now you can get my bank account. I'm totally kidding. Don't even try.
Yeah. Put all your passwords up there, and then we'll just take it down from GitHub. That's fine.
I always like to put all my passwords up there. Although honestly, this is the exact same password I use on every single demo, on regardless of whether it's SQL Server, Postgres, or any of my stuff. So if you want to hack my demo databases, you're more than welcome to.
You might have a surprise in your next demo. You never know. You'll be going in there.
Oh, that'd be fun. But basically, this is all you need, right? It's the basic setup. Flyway needs to know where to go. Then your first Flyway script, now in my case, the first one is just creating a table. But you could have it create, if you have 100 tables, 1,000 tables, that's great. You can do that. Then it's just a question of doing this. Now, what I've done here, I can't run these commands for you, but Flyway clean removes everything in the database. Flyway baseline then says, okay, now that I've got an empty database, establish that as the baseline. Okay, cool. Now that that's established as the baseline, run the first migration. And the first migration, in this case, again, making it simple, it's going to create the sales table. That's all it does. So if you had 1,000 tables here, the same setup would be how I would start. Flyway clean to make sure there's nothing in the database. Flyway baseline to establish an empty baseline as your start. Flyway migrate to run version 1 of your script, and now you've got a database in source control. YAML, by the way, doesn't enter into it yet because where was I? There we go. Flyway conf. Flyway conf is just a text file. So it's just a configuration file. There's no YAML here. I'm sure our developers will eventually add YAML, but YAML doesn't enter into it yet. These are base commands run from DOS, Linux, PowerShell. They all run the same way, and you can run them as a container. These aren't the containerized commands. I can get you the containerized commands if you want. But then DBUp is roughly the same. DBUp would have exactly the same setup. Create your core script with your base tables, and then the stuff that you need to do this, and you're good to go. It's it's easy to get started. It gets complicated after you get going, but it's easy to get started. Does that answer the question?
It seems like it might be yes, but I'm waiting for a message back. Oh, okay. Here we go.
Thanks for that.
I mean, there's DB up. Yeah,
oh, and so people, wow, that sounds really rude. So everybody, I put a link in there for Git or GitHub type walkthrough on Code Academy. I heard good things about Code Academy, I think, but I never used it, so I'm not sure if it's good or not, but might be useful if you need more Git stuff, more Git information that Grant didn't tell us because he didn't have time.
Well, I could have done all that. But this is DBUp, and you see it is a manifest of changes. It's the same kind of concept. I mean, it again uses a basic scripting language and a setup, and then it runs commands from there. And it's It's a nice tool, right? I can't knock it. And it's open source, same as Flyway. Just like Flyway, it supports about 25 different database systems. So I mean, it's a decent tool, really is. I can't throw rocks at it. It's not my preferred tool, but it is a good tool, and I don't mind showing it off.
I've never heard of it before. I'll check it out. I've heard of Flyway, but before Redgate bought that.
Yeah. We've only owned them for a couple of years. Flyway is a fantastic tool. I mean, and I could show you the paid stuff for Flyway, and it's even better. There's like the official thing is like, well, this is for individuals and this is for enterprises, and I'm always like, no. This is for the happy path, and this is for the unhappy path. And so the happy path is what I'm showing you here in DB Up even. Here's 4 scripts. They run in this order. Run your scripts. We win, right? The happy path. Oh, darn. Oh, everything was on fire. I need to run script 3 before I run script 4. Ah, the unhappy path. Now you got to fix things and do all kinds of weird stuff. That's where the paid tools come in.